After Han Li's cultivation reached its peak, he unexpectedly encountered Elder Linghu again. Han Li was no longer the timid qi refining cultivator he once was in Yellow Maple Valley. He was now a renowned cultivator throughout the mortal realm. Elder Linghu, however, remained the same shrewd nascent soul cultivator, prioritizing the interests of his sect, but his attitude towards Han Li was completely different. Perhaps due to the presence of Lu Luo, the old fox remained composed upon seeing Han Li, showing no sign of distress. It was unclear whether he failed to recognize the former Foundation establishment disciple or if his cunning was so profound that he could conceal his emotions. After the Hall of Heroes meeting concluded, many cultivators hurriedly departed. Han Li, along with the cultivator surnamed Lu and the Fire Dragon Child, walked out of the hall. Suddenly, his expression shifted, and his brow furrowed slightly. Seeing this, the cultivator surnamed Lu turned to Han Li and asked if something was wrong. Han Li's expression returned to normal. He explained that an old friend wished to see him and he needed to attend to him. He asked the cultivator surnamed Lu and the Fire Dragon Child to leave first, promising to return shortly. The cultivator surnamed Lu nodded in agreement, saying he would first return to convey the matters discussed in the Heavenly Dao Alliance to his fellow cultivators and relay the news back to his senior brother to see how the various factions of the Heavenly Dao Alliance would ultimately handle the matter. The Fire Dragon Child, meanwhile, had a slight smirk on his face. Han Li bowed and took his leave, then walked slowly in another direction, seemingly slowly, but actually quickly disappearing into the distance. Having walked only a few steps from the entrance of the main hall, the cultivator surnamed Lu glanced in the direction Han Li had vanished. The Fire Dragon Child, seeing this, asked the cultivator surnamed Lu with a half smile if he was worried. The cultivator surnamed Lu's heart skipped a beat, but he remained outwardly calm, asking in return what there was to worry about. The Fire Dragon Child implied that the cultivator surnamed Lu should have guessed even without being told. He mentioned that Han Li hailed from Huangfeng Valley, and that Elder Linghu, like the senior brother of the cultivator surnamed Lu, was nearing the end of his lifespan. Currently, Huangfeng Valley has no other nascent soul cultivator besides Elder Linghu, who must be extremely anxious. After all, a sect as large as Huangfeng Valley, without a nascent soul cultivator to lead it, would not only decline but might even face annihilation. Someone had clearly transmitted a message to Han Li just now. It would be strange if it wasn't Elder Linghu. The cultivator surnamed Lu pondered for a moment, then asked the Fire Dragon Child how he knew Han Li's past, as he seemed not to have mentioned it. The Fire Dragon Child frankly replied that there was no need for the cultivator surnamed Lu to inform him. The ancient sword sect naturally investigated the sudden appearance of such a young new elder. This was not a secret. An investigation would reveal the truth. Upon hearing this, the cultivator surnamed Lu didn't say anything more. After a moment's thought, he shook his head, indicating that it wasn't strange for Han Li to visit old acquaintances. If he truly wanted to return to Yellow Maple Valley, he should have gone long ago. Why wait until today? Fire Dragon Boy, however, disagreed, believing that ancestor Linghu was cunning and shrewd. Since he was willing to invite Han Li, he must have some confidence in persuading him. The cultivator surnamed Lu remained silent for a long time, finally revealing a worried expression on his face, and let out a long sigh. He said with a wry smile, "Let fate decide. If junior brother Han really wants to return to Yellow Maple Valley, can he and his senior brother really hold him back?" Han Li walked along a quiet side street, his gaze shifting left and right. He suddenly stopped, his gaze landing on a two-story pavilion on the side of the street. The pavilion was only 6 or 7 jong high, with a cloth banner hanging in front of the door, bearing only a large character for tea. It was a tea house. 2 yellow-robed cultivators, both at the Foundation establishment stage, stood guard outside. Seeing him approach, their gazes turned towards him. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face as he walked forward unhurriedly. The 2 cultivators immediately bowed respectfully upon seeing him, indicating that their master was already waiting for him inside. Han Li nodded slightly, said nothing more, and entered the tea house. The tea house was completely silent, as if it were empty. Han Li hesitated for a moment before ascending the stairs to the 2nd floor. The 2nd floor was equally deserted, with only one person seated at the central octagonal table, none other than the Elder Linghu he had seen in the main hall. Elder Linghu, dressed in a yellow robe, with a sallow complexion, held a cup of tea, savoring it carefully. Seeing Han Li approach, his gaze flickered slightly, but he remained silent. Han Li also said nothing, walking quickly to sit opposite him. A blue teacup was already prepared on the table before him. Linghu Patriarch raised his hand, and the teapot on the table floated up on its own, steadily pouring out half a cup of clear, emerald green tea before gently settling back into place. Linghu Patriarch then narrowed his eyes and spoke slowly, saying that the spiritual tea in this tea house was quite flavorful and inviting Han Li to try some. Han Li smiled faintly, picked up the teacup, examined the clear tea, took a sip, and calmly stated that this tea was indeed superior to ordinary spiritual tea. Linghu Patriarch gently set down his teacup, saying leisurely that it seemed fellow Daoist Han was also a connoisseur of tea, and that his choice of this place to meet was quite appropriate. Han Li, however, no longer beat around the bush, looking directly at him calmly and saying, "Senior specifically invited me here, surely not just for tea tasting. Please feel free to offer any guidance." Amidst the rising steam of the tea, their eyes met. Linghu Patriarch had clearly recognized him long ago, and Han Li had already vaguely guessed the purpose of his former master's visit. "Since you are so impatient, fellow Daoist, I will not beat around the bush. I wonder if fellow Daoist Han would be willing to return to Huangfeng Valley as an elder." Linghu Patriarch said calmly, as if it were a trivial matter. "Return to Huangfeng Valley." Han Li's face showed no change, he simply looked down at the teacup in his hand, remaining expressionless and silent. "Regardless of right or wrong, I do not wish to say much about what happened back then. I only want to tell you, fellow Daoist Han, that my lifespan is short. At most, in 20 years, I will pass away. If you are willing to return, Huangfeng Valley will essentially belong to you. You wouldn't hold a grudge over such a small matter from back then, would you?" Linghu Patriarch's eyes flashed with a sharp light as he spoke slowly. "I no longer care about the past. If I were in your position, I might have done the same. But now I've joined the Luoyun sect and have no intention of switching allegiances. Fellow Daoist Linghu, you should find another cultivator," Han Li said, raising his head and shaking his head at Elder Linghu. "I know you're currently in the Luoyun sect, but there are still 2 elders there. Wouldn't you be constantly constrained there? It's not as satisfying as wielding power yourself," Elder Linghu said with a sneer. "I think you've misunderstood something. I didn't join any sect for power. I simply want a suitable place to cultivate. I have no interest in wielding sect power," Han Li said, pursing his lips with a subtle hint of sarcasm. Elder Linghu frowned slightly upon hearing this, but quickly regained his composure. Fellow Daoist Han probably doesn't understand how much it benefits one's cultivation to hold power in a sect. Not only will you not have to bother finding rare spiritual herbs and materials, but your status in the cultivation world will also be drastically different. Besides, even if you truly have no interest whatsoever, don't you have any regard for your former sect? You should know that there are still many of your former fellow disciples in Huangfeng Valley. If it weren't for a nascent soul cultivator guarding it, our valley might very well have been wiped out overnight by other sects joining forces. Their fate is obvious." Ancestor Linghu began to appeal to his emotions. "Spiritual herbs and materials, I have no shortage of these things as an elder in Luoyun sect. As for status and empty titles in the cultivation world, I care even less. As for the rise and fall of sects, that's a very common thing. Even those sects with long histories have mostly lost their lineage and disappeared. As for my former fellow disciples, each has their own destiny, and I won't concern myself with them." Han Li smiled calmly, showing no sign of being swayed. After hearing Han Li's words, Elder Linghu frowned, remaining silent for a moment before slowly picking up his teacup and taking a sip. "How could I not know what fellow Daoist Han has said? But I am different from you. I have stayed in Huangfeng Valley for over 1,000 years, and my feelings for it far surpass those of ordinary people. Naturally, I do not wish for Huangfeng Valley to lose its lineage upon my passing. It seems you are indeed unmoved by fame and fortune. However, if you are willing to accept the position of Elder of Huangfeng Valley, I am willing to bequeath some of my possessions after my death. Among them are many treasures I have collected over the years. They will be of great use to your future cultivation," Elder Linghu said suddenly, much to Han Li's surprise. "You are leaving your possessions to me? If I remember correctly, don't you have disciples and followers?" Han Li's heart skipped a beat upon hearing this, but he subconsciously narrowed his eyes before calmly asking, "My disciples' highest cultivation level is only mid-stage core formation. Leaving them here would only bring disaster. Even if you hadn't appeared, I would have disposed of most of the treasures elsewhere. They wouldn't have remained in Huangfeng Valley," Elder Linghu said with a cold laugh. Han Li stroked his chin, deep in thought. It was impossible for him not to be tempted by Elder Linghu's words. However, he was also well aware that accepting the position of Elder of Huangfeng Valley would likely mean immediately facing a series of thorny issues with the 6 sects and the 9 Kingdoms alliance. These matters couldn't be resolved quickly, and as the sole elder of Huangfeng Valley, while he would wield considerable power, he wouldn't be as carefree as he was in Luoyun sect. More importantly, there were also some difficult issues involving Nangong Wan and the Yangyu sect to deal with. Thank you for your kind offer, fellow Daoist. I still think it's best not to mention joining Huangfeng Valley, Han Li said after much deliberation, shaking his head in refusal. Upon hearing this, Elder Linghu was not angry, but his face was full of helplessness. Fellow Daoist is unwilling to agree to such conditions. It seems fellow Daoist Han truly doesn't want to get involved in the mess of our 6 sects. If that's the case, how about I change the conditions? Elder Linghu sighed and said. How can I change them? Han Li's expression changed, becoming curious. How about this? Fellow Daoist doesn't need to become an elder of our Yellow Maple Valley, but I will give you 3 precious treasures in exchange for you assisting Yellow Maple Valley 3 times in your lifetime. Of course, this assistance will only be within your capabilities. Elder Linghu said with a wry smile. Assisting 3 times within my capabilities. This condition isn't excessive, I can agree to it. Han Li thought for a moment about Elder Linghu's request and quickly nodded in agreement. Ancestor Linghu smiled slightly, then reached into his waist and pulled out 3 items, placing them on the table as if they had been prepared beforehand. Han Li said nothing, his gaze falling on the 3 items, examining them briefly. A small, shimmering blue shield, a red jade bottle and a jet black jade pendant-like object. Han Li didn't stand on ceremony, first picking up the small, shimmering blue shield. The shield felt soft and light in his hand, almost weightless, which surprised Han Li. Upon closer inspection, even with his current knowledge, he couldn't tell what material it was made of. This is an ancient treasure I acquired many years ago, and it's been with me for quite some time. I call it the Blue Light Shield. This treasure possesses considerable power, especially against fire attribute attacks. It's incredibly effective. You'll see for yourself once you try it, said Elder Linghu, gazing at the shield in Han Li's hand with a hint of reluctance. Han Li stroked the shield's surface a couple of times with one hand before placing it back on the table, knowing full well that this treasure was indeed extraordinary and that the other party was not exaggerating. Then he picked up the red jade bottle. Inside this bottle is the inner core of a demon beast I obtained when I single-handedly infiltrated the depths of the Mulan grassland and slew a level 7 iron-winged eagle demon beast. It's an extremely rare material. Whether for alchemy or other uses, it's quite useful, Elder Linghu added. A level 7 demon core. Upon hearing this, Han Li's expression remained unchanged, but he sighed inwardly. Although a level 7 demon core was extremely rare in Tiannan, it was practically useless to him. So he smiled, slightly opened the medicine bottle, glanced at it, then put the cap back on and casually placed it back in its original position. His gaze finally fell on the last item. But this time, the old ancestor Linghu smiled strangely and didn't offer any introduction. Han Li, however, stared intently at the object that resembled a jade pendant, remaining silent. Could this be a jade talisman crafted by an ancient cultivator? Han Li gazed at it for a while, finally speaking with some uncertainty. Upon hearing Han Li's words, a hint of surprise flashed across the old ancestor Linghu's face. Fellow Daoist Han, have you seen this kind of jade talisman before? As far as I know, this kind of talisman, unique to ancient times, has been lost in Tiannan for a long time. Very few local cultivators even know about it, the old man asked curiously. I only occasionally met a fellow Daoist who knew about it, and he told me a little about it, Han Li said with a slight smile, speaking casually. This jade talisman was obtained during a near-death adventure of mine. This item is definitely extraordinary. Although I haven't yet mastered the correct method to use it and can only unleash a small portion of its power, even so, its supernatural abilities are terrifying. I have used it to defeat powerful enemies several times. It must be a masterpiece meticulously crafted by an ancient cultivator skilled in the Tao of talismans, Elder Linghu said, beckoning to the black jade talisman on the table. The jade talisman was sucked into the old man's hand with a whoosh. Then, he uttered a few ancient, low incantations, and with a flick of his hand, the jade talisman transformed into a ball of black light. A chilling, icy wind swept by, and a strange, blackish-red hand suddenly appeared above Linghu Patriarch's head. This monstrous beast gleamed with a dark red glow, its 5 fingers spread several feet in size, and black, sinister flames flickered intermittently. An inexplicable, eerie aura filled the entire tavern with the appearance of this strange hand. Han Li's face showed surprise, and his heart tightened. This is the only supernatural power I've been able to use after hundreds of years of research since obtaining this jade talisman. The Shenhua ghost hand it transforms into can grab almost anything, except for treasures of extreme young and strength. And once it grabs something, even slightly inferior magical artifacts and ancient treasures immediately lose their supernatural powers and obediently surrender. Even top-tier treasures will lose much of their spiritual essence and power. As Ancestor Linghu spoke, with a thought, the black hand suddenly grew several times larger, gently reaching for a nearby wooden table. The black yin fire swept over it silently, and the wooden table vanished instantly before even touching it, as if it had never existed. Seeing this, Han Li gasped. This thing looked somewhat like the mysterious supernatural power of demonic cultivators who use split spirits to attack. But the black hand originates from the jade talisman, so there's no worry about damage to the split spirit. And judging from the strange appearance of the yin fire, it must have other wondrous properties. This jade talisman surely possesses other wondrous properties. Unfortunately, my time is running out, and I won't have the chance to comprehend its secrets. Fellow Daoist, you are young, but you still have great potential. However, most of the power contained within the talisman has already been used up. Fellow Daoist Han, you must use it carefully in the future. As Elder Linghu spoke, he pointed a finger at the black hand, which transformed back into a beam of black light and flew back to the table, revealing the jade talisman's original form. Han Li smiled, but he was very interested in the last jade talisman. Even if this talisman wasn't as powerful as Elder Linghu described, he could still glean insights into the ancient cultivator's understanding of talismanic arts from this ancient talisman. This would definitely be of great help to him in the future. After Elder Linghu finished his explanation, Han Li immediately flicked his sleeve across the table with a swift, flowing motion, and the 3 items vanished instantly. But what appeared on the table was 3 gleaming white jade array plates appeared. These 3 array plates are magical artifacts I personally crafted. No one else can imitate them. If Huangfeng Valley encounters any trouble I can resolve after your passing, I will certainly not refuse, Han Li said calmly, looking up at Elder Linghu. Good, that's enough, fellow Daoist Han. I've done my best for what's to come, Elder Linghu said with a smile. However, since they had finished discussing business, Han Li had no intention of lingering. He immediately rose to take his leave. Elder Linghu didn't try to persuade him to stay. After a few polite words, he watched Han Li descend the stairs and leave unhurriedly. Then, the smile on his face vanished, and he stared motionlessly at the teapot on the table, seemingly lost in thought. After leaving the tea house, Han Li did not immediately return to his residence. Instead, he looked up at the sky, casually found a quiet corner, took out the jade slip that the white-robed elder of the Heavenly Extreme sect had given him, carefully scanned it with his divine sense, and then showed a hint of hesitation on his face.